Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Keys to AWS Optimization, Season 14. I don't want to think about how many times I've said welcome to this show at this point, but I'm so happy to see everyone again. Thank you for joining us back after our little break for some of the kind of between quarters time. And I'm going to bring you a very fabulous show all about ElastiCache optimization, something we haven't actually dived into in any of the 14 seasons. So when these guys came to me saying they wanted to talk about it, I was like, oh my goodness, we must get them on. We are going to be chatting all about optimizing and moving something called Valkey. And if you don't know what that is, stick around to understand everything and learn from it. Throughout, we'll be sharing links and lots of resources. And of course, I want to hear your questions in the chat. Pop in where you're joining us from. Anybody new here, let us know. But before we get started, we have our classic intro question, which is, have you had a frugal week or a splurgy week? Rugby, why don't you go first? Have you had a frugal week or a splurgy week this week?
Sure, yeah. I think I've had like a frugal week. Like
Yeah.
there's been quite some time when I went to Costco and they've been out of eggs. And so this week when I saw like they had like the 5 dozen egg crate, I just picked it up. So now the last week I've been just having eggs every day.
Every day. Yeah. I remember someone saying recently there was like this whole thing on eggs and like Taylor Swift should sort it out. I think it was like the Grammys or something. I have no idea. But yeah, anyway, Damon, what about you? A frugal week or a splurgy week?
I think a little bit splurgy. I think, we've got relatives coming in a few weeks, so we had to go out and get some things to make the house look a little bit more presentable, of course. So, it's
Nice.
more for the course for that. But yeah, it's been good though. It's been a busy week, and it's couldn't ask for more. It's been a great week.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, I was camping at the weekend, so I feel like that in itself is relatively frugal because it's like quite a cheap option for a nice little trip. We did rent a paddleboard and go in the river, so it was like very wholesome kind of nature activities that we had. Brilliant. Let's get into it. So welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Steph Gooch. I'm an SA advocate here to help you on your FinOps journey. And with me are my two lovely guests. Let's get into some 1-minute origin stories. Then why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Well, I was dumped in a vat of nuclear acid, and that's how I got my superpowers. That's my origin story. So I've been at AWS for about 6, maybe close to 7 years now in this role as an ElastiCache specialist solutions architect. Prior to this, I've worked at companies, MongoDB, Redis Labs, Sun Microsystems, a host in tech, and tech for the sake of tech, really, not because it's helpful for any specific industry. I just like tech. But yeah, I've done a lot of different things, and I really enjoyed being the solutions architecture role. It's really fun being on kind of the designing and the solutions aspect of it, with customers.
Love that. And long term element in specializing, it's always good when you get teeth into a certain subject. Rugby, what about you? Give us your origin story.
Sure, yeah. Rugved, I've been with Amazon for almost 8.5 years now. So an old fart in Amazon. Did a couple of different roles within like Amazon, like cloud support, and then the SA roles in the retail side, and then now in the optics team. So been with optics for almost like 7 months now. So doing a lot of stuff with the auto manufacturing vertical these days to help them like optimize their cost.
Yeah, it's funny, like time. I didn't realize you'd been here this long because I always have my small window of optics and what that kind of thing is. So shout out to any optics people are watching. Say hi in the chat. ElastiCache. Damon, let's start from the very top. Give us, for those who haven't heard of this service, what is it and when would a customer use it?
Right. So ElastiCache, as the name kind of implies, is often used as a caching service. It's a fully managed caching service. Yeah, surprise, shocker, spoiler. And, it's not just for caching. We can get into that a little bit later, but it's that's one of the major use cases. And folks use it because it really speeds up data-driven application performance and also, reduces latency, but also it really helps customers to optimize costs, which is, I'm pretty sure why I'm on the show today. Yeah, we can get into that a little bit more, but it's really one of those few services that allows you to do both, improve performance and optimize for costs.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And when it comes to thinking about it, what are some common, obviously the caching part, but what are frequent reasons customers would start to use ElastiCache in their day-to-day kind of development?
Yeah. Well, if you think about just, there's obviously there's caching, right? And I just want to go over the fundamentals of it, which is essentially it's accessing frequently read data or frequently accessed data. Or is it just like CPU cache? Or I guess I'm dating myself, back in the days, there were spinning hard disks and those had cache on them. So, caching is not going to go away anytime soon, whether it's on a micro scale or macro scale, like CloudFront,
Mm.
that's what we do, or not just for CDNs, but anything from small to big. And so caching is huge. It should be a part of that strategic part of everyone's workload, when they're thinking long term. But the other use cases that ElastiCache comes in for is really a couple different things. Anytime you really need performance, that's really what it's used for. It doesn't speed up like CPUs or anything, but anything that's frequently accessed, it's fantastic. So there's leaderboards, and we can get into some customer stories later, but anytime you have thousands and tens of thousands of things that come in at the same time, you need to sort them basically and show like ranks and stats and quickly look them up. That's a fantastic use case for it. And it's because Valkey and the other engines inside of ElastiCache have special data types that lend themselves to these different use cases. So it's not just a string or a key value where it's just like, there's a key and a name, or a name and a value, and that's it. These data types are actually acted upon differently inside of the engine. So that's what gives it its microsecond response. And seriously, these engines can respond in single-digit microseconds, which is incredibly fast. So there's leaderboards, there's things like session stores, which is phenomenal at. There's something called a hyperlog log, which we can get into if we want to. There's sorted sets, there's sets, and these are all data types, but the use cases themselves really kind of just spread across the board. People use it for all sorts of different things.
Yeah. I was joking before we did the episode that the only time I ever think about ElastiCache is when I'm doing essay prep for the exams, because it was never something that my business used. And it's not something that I find I talk to a lot of customers about. Is sometimes it's there, but it's not something I confidently dive into. Rugby, have you spoken to a lot of customers about ElastiCache when it comes to optimization?
Yeah, there have been a lot of customers who have been using ElastiCache for a while. And so with the new announcements regarding the Valkey that we'll be diving into, I think I've been having those conversations more lately where we dive into like the cost optimization these days.
And don't worry, guys, we're going to actually show you in the cost and use report how to find this spend and also how to identify ones that could potentially move to Valkey in there. So if there's also finance people watching and you're thinking like, how do I identify these kind of opportunities? Then stick around for that. But mentioning Valkey, and I like the way that, because I kept saying it wrong, and Damon was like, it's value key, like tagging. And I was like, oh, so if you remember it, that's the way to remember it. But do you want to just explain what this is in relation to itself and also ElastiCache in general?
For sure. So Valkey itself is actually a fork of the open source Redis version 7.2.4. So this was built and released before the licensing changed for Redis. So, when there was a license change for Redis OSS. And so when that happened, it really prompted kind of a large portion of the user and the developer community to fork the code basically. And now it's under the Linux Foundation. It's being stewarded by that. And so we don't own it, other companies don't own it. It's truly open source. So it retains that fully open source BSC license. So the Valkey project itself has major contributions from all sorts of companies and innovations, like, of course, like Amazon Web Services. There's other large companies, Google and Oracle, Snap, lots of companies with incredible engineers that work on this. And so keep in mind, Amazon Web Services, we don't just contribute to this for open source. Rather, we also contribute to like a lot of Apache type of software like Cassandra and Kafka. And, there's also Kubernetes and Postgres. So, we do a lot of open source contributions. So this is really kind of where our innovations are going. And Valkey is really where the innovations are going from us and others and other companies and other contributors moving this open source in-memory data store forward.
Brilliant.
So ElastiCache, I'm sorry, I just quickly, ElastiCache is the fully managed service that we provide that you can either use the Valkey engine or the Memcache engine, which is a little bit different, or the Redis open source engine 7, version 7 and previously.
Yeah. Okay. I was just about to ask, like, to compare, are there different use cases for when you would use each of them at a high level for this kind of chat?
Yeah. So, originally interesting, ElastiCache started off with the Memcache engine, which is, I'm assuming, Elastic and then cache, Memcache. And so then we introduced the different engine, Redis OSS at the time. And then, now we're introducing Valkey. And so there's Memcache is kind of like the original, the OG, caching. And so what that is it's pretty, I won't say simple because I could never write something like that, but it's a key value store where you store frequently used data. And it's simple in terms of its access pattern. There's really only one data type. Now when you get into Valkey, and it's like there's other data types. And so you would use that for a number of different things. Like Memcache is just on a per node basis. You write to one node, and then if you have two nodes, great. You have double it, but you have to control where your data is going. So it's a little bit more complex. Amazon actually provides a bit more intelligence for that if you use our version of it, but I won't get into the fully managed service of that. But the Valkey engine not only has all these different data types we talked about, but it also has replication, it has failover, it has all sorts of extra mechanisms you would need to have a real kind of solid production kind of caching system, basically. And so why would you choose one over the other? If I were to start today and do something brand new, it would probably be on Valkey, unless I was using some type of service that absolutely required Memcache because it relied on certain libraries. But most customers use Valkey because it, has all the newest features, and it is comparable in terms of performance. So it's about the same.
Okay, good to know.
And then, Damon, you also mentioned like AWS does like add on new innovations onto Valkey. Can you talk more about that? Like what are those innovations like?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I think two of the larger ones probably are the improvement that we handle, that we contributed, which is handling memory. So there's a much more efficient way of managing the index itself. Of even a key value system like Valkey has to have some type of way of tracking, what data is where. And even though there's not necessarily built-in secondary indexes where, show me everybody with the first name Steph, it won't do that. But if I have username : Steph, then I can probably grab that pretty quickly. But with something like with the memory perspective, what we can do is actually use that index and shrink it, because the old way of doing it had a lot of different trails, back and forth. And what we've done is simplify that, made it more efficient. And so that ultimately results in like 20% more memory per node, or 20% reduction in memory usage on average. So that was one big one. The other one, which is probably much bigger, is the performance improvements and latency improvements. So if you compare it with like an older version, like let's say, version 6 of Redis OSS or something, open source, we have improved the performance, and probably especially with Redis 5, there was a 230% improvement in terms of what we contributed to the performance improvement, 70% reduction in latency since like Redis version 7. We also offload a lot of the things like TLS encryption to the other vCPUs. We do multiplexing, which means if a lot of connection or a lot of requests come in, we try to intelligently route those at the same time to the same thread. And so that really improves. These are all sorts of things that our engineers looked at and refined, things that you wouldn't normally think of because, it's only one server, well, that server times 100, and that really makes an impact. So it's dramatic reduction. And we've seen one of the tests recently showed over 1 million requests per second on a single node. So that's pretty impressive.
Don't forget to drop any questions into the chat for us. We had one. Where did it go? Here we go. What are the savings from using Valkey, I guess, in comparison to Redis? I want to say Memcache. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, it's a little bit of history. So for those that don't know, Redis stands for Remote Dictionary Service. So that's kind of where the term came from. So if you are currently using ElastiCache with Redis OSS or Memcache, and you move to, let's say, ElastiCache for Valkey, you immediately get a 20% savings. Basically, it's 20% less than either of those engines. We, of course, also provide reserved instance pricing. So, if you commit to 1 year, I think, or maybe whatever, 3 years now, you get, increased cost savings. For ElastiCache serverless, there is a 33% lower. There was a cost reduction of 33% if you move to Valkey from either Memcache or Redis. And so we also have another service, MemoryDB, which is our durable version, basically, of Valkey and Redis. And that has a 30% reduction in terms of the nodes. And MemoryDB also has an associated cost of gigabyte written, basically, per hour, or gigabytes written. And so if you use the Valkey engine, that's actually, you get 10 terabytes of data written per month at no charge. And then all the other data that's written is at an 80% reduction in cost as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big kind of change lots of different things between different types. Um,
It is, yeah.
yeah. Wait, did you mention serverless in that? I don't know.
I did. Yeah, that's 33% cost reduction compared to the other engines. Yeah.
Yeah. Ruckmead, when you're speaking to customers, are they bringing up serverless as an option that they're moving to, or is it still are they still kind of very static?
So it's primarily self-designed clusters as of these days. I've had less conversations on serverless right now, but it's better to use serverless so that you don't have to play around with the managing the clusters. So we are recommending that yes, if you are able to migrate over to serverless, that would provide you like much more additional benefit as well.
Brilliant. To kind of lay out there in case you were like, oh, I haven't, because when I think of serverless, I feel like a lot of people do, they immediately go to Lambda, and that's like the only service. And I think a lot of people forget that a lot of our other services have a serverless service, a serverless option. Damon, what's the big difference between ElastiCache? Is it on demand? Is that no? What would it be? Is there a certain word for it that's like the normal one and then the serverless one?
Oh, I see what you're saying. There's ElastiCache service, and I think depending on who you're talking to, there's either node-based configuration or self-designed clusters.
Yeah.
Kind of look at it either way.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
What's the big difference between them?
Well, clearly serverless is reduced administration overhead and, just the management. Essentially, you don't need to worry about, and even though the fully managed service is, head and shoulders and miles above just managing it yourself, if you take serverless, there's other things that you get. Not only is it really effective for workloads that vary, if you don't always have 100% peak activity, then serverless is fantastic because it, changes based on your usage. But serverless from the technology perspective, what it allows is clients to have less logic basically built in them, because we put a lot of best practices into the service itself in terms of, the endpoints that you connect to. It does things like automatic failover, retries, all these things that your client would normally have to do, and you might even be coding into your client to handle. It handles most of the operational aspects of that with some of our best practices we've learned over, the decade or more that we've had this service.
Yeah, and it's possible to all this using like self-designed cluster as well, but you have to configure your clusters accordingly. You have to make
Sure.
them multi-AZ, auto failover, and all those things. Depending on what your workload is, you'll have to design how many clusters you want and design accordingly.
Yeah, I feel like there may even be an episode in that. It's just like diving it. Chat, let me know if you think that would be interesting. Like the other serverless things. I did a long time ago. I did like a whole thing about the others. Have you ever seen the Nicole Kidman film?
Yeah.
From years ago, and I would call it that, and I would be like, not this film, but it was always because back in the day, again, making myself sound old, when we first had Cost Explorer, it would only show you the first 5 services, and then it would just say others, and there was no lines below that in Cost Explorer, and so you had to really dig into the code to figure out like what were the other things. Now they show you 7, and then if you scroll down the page, you can see it. But I used to do a bit about what is in the others, like what are some of the other ways to save money that wasn't EC2, RDS, S3, and like whatever the other 2 were. So I think that there is like the other serverless things that we have options. Brilliant. Okay. Anything else you want to cover? Well, let's maybe talk a little bit about Valkey. We kind of talked about it, but what in terms of what will you see performance-wise by moving it, or what will you see like day-to-day? We've had some questions about moving, which we'll come to in our demo very shortly. But yeah, anything that people should know about like the process of moving or what to be aware of?
Yeah, so there's 2 different aspects I think of that. One is introducing caching itself, if you're not already caching in some way. And there's also I should say the upgrade of going from ElastiCache Redis OSS to ElastiCache Valkey. There's 2 different ways of looking at that. And so if you're already using ElastiCache today, depending on the version that you're using, you could see anywhere from, marginal improvements to dramatic improvements. And I can't say what those are going to be because I don't know what versions you're on. It also highly depends on sometimes your client configuration. But what you'll typically see again is you'll most likely see, even if you're using a recent version of ElastiCache, you'll most likely see modest performance improvements. If you're using a previous generation, maybe like Redis OSS, like version 6, and I say previous because Redis 6 is not even really that old, Redis OSS 6. And so you have that aspect, but you also have that memory improvement, memory efficiency improvement. So you're definitely going to see an improvement in terms of how effective your node-based caches are. Some people actually see that they're using less memory and they can actually scale back their ElastiCache clusters, which is really nice. So that's probably the biggest thing that you'll notice. And even if you're running on an older version, a fairly older version, it's still a single click upgrade. You don't have to go through lots of different versions to get to Valkey.
Okay. That's actually a good segue. I want to show this question in the chat, and then we'll go into some of the demo elements about showing. I'll let you kind of set up the demo aspect. But we have a person here who says, we use PHP, I'm just say that, and have Redis clusters to do things like sessions, cache, job queues, connecting to PHP Redis. Are Redis libraries interchangeable with Valkey? So we boot up Valkey and change the endpoint in the application, and they followed up with, yeah, if we'd like to move, do we change the application code that interacts with Redis right now, or will it work as is?
Perfect. That is probably one of the most important questions, and I'm glad ZBC brought it up.
Thank you, ZBC, for asking it. I didn't know the asked question. Great question.
Yeah, and when we talk about Valkey, it is literally a drop-in replacement for Redis OSS. There's no changes needed, especially with ElastiCache. If you upgrade on ElastiCache and you have an endpoint, the endpoint remains the same. There's no downtime. This is an online upgrade, and so no changes necessary at all.
Brilliant. There we go. Hopefully that has inspired people to make the change. But let's what we'll do is we'll bring up your screen, and then do you want to set the scene for Damien, what you're going to show us in this first bit of the demos?
Sure. Yeah. So the first demo is going to be a kind of a demonstration of what caching provides in general. Now I'm using ElastiCache Valkey as the caching service, and I'm using Postgres as a backend database. And what we're going to see is the performance improvements and comparison, whether you use caching or not caching, basically. And it's going to show some dramatic improvements.
Right. So where are we right now?
So we have a little user interface here that runs, all of this is running on Amazon services. We're using Amazon RDS Postgres, and we're using Amazon ElastiCache. And what happens here is this demo will go out and ask the cache, hey, do you have the results for a certain query? If it doesn't, then it goes to the database, runs the query, gets the results, and then stores those results back in the cache. And this is called lazy loading caching. Some people call it cache aside. So what this essentially means is as the queries come in, you store the results, and this helps the chances of, if you run that query again, you're going to get a faster result. Now, again, caching is for frequently accessed data. If your data changes every second, or if you don't run the same query ever, then caching isn't going to really benefit you, right? So this is going to be one of those things where the workloads will prove out whether or not caching is going to be helpful. And so in this demo, what we have is we have the Postgres database. We're going to run 2,000 total queries. And among those 2,000 total queries, we have 200 unique queries. So as you can see, we're going to expect a cache hit rate of about 90%, because if we have a total of 2,000 queries, it randomly selects from those 200 queries, we're probably going to get about a 90% cache hit rate, or duplicates. We have the ability to run low, medium, or high complexity queries. I'm going to run high because that's most likely what happens, these pretty complex queries. And I'll show you the examples of the queries themselves. And so we're going to use the database indexes as well. So we're not cheating. We have like 28 indexes on these different systems. And so, we're not putting it at a disadvantage. And so I'm going to close the test configuration part. I'm just going to click run test. And as you see the cache hit rate start to rise, you're going to see this blue progress bar speed up quite a bit. Yeah, see, there it goes. Now it's done. So what just happened? I know that was really fast. What just happened? Well, imagine that your database or your application is querying information from the database, and now all of a sudden that data is you can access it much faster, and those queries continue to happen over and over. So if that data is in cache, it's going to reference it from cache much more frequently. So it starts to build up. It's kind of like warming up the cache, so to speak, and that's what lazy loading is about. And so what you see is a 90% cache hit rate. Now, the cache hit rate you want as high as possible, depending, because if your data changes every 5 seconds, you're probably not going to have a really high cache hit rate. If it doesn't change that often, but you query very frequently, you'll see a pretty high cache hit rate. There's no magic number. We do try to get customers to around 90% or higher, but even if you're getting a 50% cache hit rate, it's still dramatic improvements in terms of overall performance. So what does this actually mean in terms of, how fast is this? Well, if we look at the average, So in this over here on the right, you can see the average latency right now for those queries. The database took about 30 milliseconds and the cache took about half of a millisecond.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty impressive, right? And the fact that these nodes are in different AZs is even more impressive. So if you've ever worked with networking and different availability zones, you can get, if you ping a system over an availability zone, sometimes you'll get 200 microseconds, sometimes 800 microseconds. Usually it's a millisecond, almost always. But if you look at the database, it's 30 milliseconds. The network aspect of it is just a very small portion of it. If you look at the cache, it comes back pretty much as fast as the network can push it. So that's pretty impressive. Now, keep in mind, the cache isn't really SQL intelligent. It's not DynamoDB API intelligent. It doesn't know what these queries are. You're just passing it results. And so that's what it's really good at, is storing things and retrieving it very, very fast. So if you look at the actual table of the percentiles, we can see here, the database, I would say average, but P50 was about 13 milliseconds. The worst case was about 122 milliseconds. So if you scroll up, you see caching was roughly anywhere from 31 to 123 times faster. This is because, of this use case. Different use cases will be less. Different use cases could even be more. That completely depends. And so, we have some hard numbers, in our documentation, but we're always very conservative, of course, with what we say, our public documentation. We don't want to overhype anything. We want to build trust with our customers. So, what you actually get is going to be highly dependent on your workload. And just as an example, the types of queries that we're running here, they may not be the most complex queries you've seen, but they're not just like select one from this table, right?
Yeah.
So and again, this is I guess a relational database. It can also, if we like to say, if you can query it, you can cache it. So it doesn't matter what it is. If it's a relational database, non-relational, if it's an API, whatever it might be, S3 objects, you can store those too. So
could you also do it over Athena?
You could, yeah. If you can query it, you can cache it. So if you've got a client that queries information and pulls it back, right now it's the client's responsibility to take whatever results come back and then store it in the cache. So again, your client, if it queries something, it can turn around and store it in the cache for faster access.
Interesting. So it's like that I'm definitely coming at this as someone who never used it. So I'm always just like, so it's that kind of go between layer to make it faster, to have it faster, the same as you would almost like CloudFront. Is that similar?
It's similar. CloudFront operates a little bit differently, but the concept is the same, right? It's just really, it puts the most frequently read data, not necessarily more closer to you, but much more fast. You like that? That's perfect, right? Much faster. Much more better.
Much more better. Yeah. And when you configure the test, you connect it to the database. You didn't the database stack.
Yeah. Yeah. So it just as kind of a visual, and I don't really have a diagram, but we have our database here. This is my hand here. And then we have our client, right? And so they're talking back and forth. But what we normally do, if I had a third hand, what I would do is put it right here. And so, what the client does, it talks back and forth to the database. But if you use a cache, it talks to the cache first, says, hey, do you have the results of this query? And if it doesn't, then it sends it back. It doesn't. And so the client will go to the database, pull back the results, and then store it in cache. And that way, the next time it asks for it from cache, it's most likely going to be there. And so that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. Anything else you want to cover in the performance dashboard?
I don't think so. I think, some folks are going to have a mixed workload. It's not always going to be high complexity. I think, again, if you consider the fact that this can, even if you store results for, 3 queries versus 1,000 times, for that query. So if you run a query once, not 3 times, not 5 times, it's still going to give you a benefit, even if you don't run it 1,000 times. We have customers that are using this, and they are running literally millions of operations per second. And ElastiCache itself it's incredibly fast. It is actually, if you look at MemoryDB, which is also, based off of Valkey and Redis OSS, that's actually our fastest durable database at AWS because it runs on the Valkey engine.
Cool. Very nice. Do you mind? I want to make sure can we share a link to this, or is it just in the?
I can share it after. I'm so sorry. This is something I'm running on a. It will be on our GitHub repo by the end of the week, though, if people want to download it. And I don't know how you give it to your viewers, but we do have a GitHub.com Amazon ElastiCache samples repo.
Okay. All right. Well, amazing. Richard, if you could grab that and then drop it in the chat for us, that would be amazing. And if you want to follow up, email costoptimization@amazon.com if you don't know where that is, and we'll find it by the end of the week. I'll also make sure that this on the YouTube, on the Keys channel, has the link below. So we'll grab that. While I'm also kind of sharing, as a reminder, if you want to stay up to date with other things like the show and other channels, then follow the Customer Acceleration Team LinkedIn group. This is the website for it. Jump on there and we'll make sure that we announce all the fun things that we do and share. So we have a couple of questions I want to dip into. Oh, there we go. Rich already got the GitHub repo. Perfect. Look at that. He's on it. He's on it like a car by now. So couple of questions. Also, ZB_3SC said made it easy. So that's great feedback to showcase. Are existing RIs transferable if you decide to switch from Valkey to ElastiCache, Redis, or kind of vice versa?
Yes, if you're using ElastiCache for Redis right now and you upgrade to Valkey, those RIs automatically transfer.
Oh, brilliant. Nice. Well, that was way easier than I thought. And the next one, does Valkey have support for JSON, storing and retrieving query JSON documents in Valkey?
It does, in fact, yeah. So it's, Valkey is, we wouldn't position it, as something like a document DB, which is fully JSON, focused. But absolutely, it does support JSON data type, and you can query the JSON like, the elements inside of the JSON, whatever the JSON, the JSON object, the Java string object notation object.
The long title. Brilliant. Yeah, I like the phrase, and I think I'm going to steal it, which is if you can query it, you can cache it. I think is a great way to kind of be like simple. Definitely, if now I have that, if someone asks me in public, can I use that query? You can cache it. That's the answer now. We got it. Brilliant. So coming back to Valkey, we've talked about the performance impact and the cost impact itself and the savings. But the question is, how do we identify these kind of opportunities of when would be good? And so, Raghu, you're going to give us a demo of using the cost and use report to showcase this. Do you want to set the scene for a little bit before we go into it?
Sure. Yeah. So just to set a scene, like there will be a lot of clusters in your environment. It's easy to migrate over to Valkey, but to identify which clusters are eligible for upgrades, which are not, which clusters are already benefiting from an existing RI and which are not. So we have built up a curl query that will show you these are the list of clusters, these are available or like ready to migrate over to Valkyrie, and if it is benefiting from an RI or not. So it makes it easy to like visualize and also get a identify what that cost saving would look like. So as Damon mentioned, you get like 20% benefit while moving to Valkey. So this curl query will show you, depending on the clusters that you're running, what would that 20% look like on a monthly basis.
Brilliant. Okay, if you want to get your screen ready to share.
Awesome. Okay, so this is the curl query library where we have published the curl query. You can just copy this one, go to your Athena and paste it in here. I'll just replace the table name so that we are able to like the query it quickly.
Oh, is this what you were asking on Slack? It's quite funny. There's the 07 or using 7. I think
Yes.
Sometimes with internal, it's 07, I think, and it gets very stressful if you don't. So if yours looks different and you ever get stressed by it, it might be 07, it might be 7.
Yes.
Check your
like the customer curl queries would usually be 07. Mine was erroring out, so I replaced it with 7, and it's able to execute on this one. So if you take a look at the results, you will see which account IDs are like the account ID for the cluster, which cache engine it's running, the instance type, if it is single AZ or multi-AZ. Now, why is this important? Because in order to migrate over to Valkey, your cluster should be in a multi-AZ deployment. If it is in a single AZ deployment, you need to enable multi-AZ for it before upgrading over to Valkey. And so the status will tell you whether it is available for upgrade or not. And then the current monthly cost, what would the monthly cost look like with that 20% cost reduction, and the estimated potential savings. I don't have a reserved instance or reserved nodes on my account, so you don't see it, but you will see those below in this result, where this RI status will show up as a reserved instance as well. So, and the one thing to note here is there is no cost associated, as in the unblended cost will show up as 0 for the reserved instances. So the result will show up as 0 benefit, but that's not the case. Even with having the RI in place, what happens is basically with the normalization factor, right? So if you're running like a R7G 4x large like node, you get like around like 32 units of like 32 units of utilization. And when you move over to Valkey, you get that 20% discount, so it's going to come down around like 25.6 or something. So you have an additional like 6.4 units to use up somewhere else. So you could use it on a different like instance like R7 X large, or you could use it for like 25% of another R7G 4X large node as well. So that is also a benefit that you could use. So you don't have to worry about the reserved instances. Like that's an additional benefit on top of it.
So let's just, I want to double down into that. So if I had a, give me a size, put a size of instance on the screen. Like, what letters do they use? Are there sizes on here or not? If I just like,
yes. So there is yeah.
Okay. So say we had an R7, oh my God, R7GX large, and I bought a reserved instance for that. Is it tied to this R7? Is the whole thing attached to it, or is it just to a certain aspect of it?
Yeah, so it's tied to the family. So you could use it for any of the R7Gs. It could be used for X large, 4X large, 2X large, depending on what you're using. It's like a size flexible, but within the same instance family.
Right. Okay. And perfect. So moving that, you could, like Damon said, you could move the Valkey, and then you could always move down a size if you don't need as much capacity because it's more optimized. So you might be able to get like a double whammy of a saving.
Yes, that is correct.
Perfect. So there's a couple and also just like caveat, if anyone's new to the show, welcome. But you've also touched on a few things here, which is, so in terms of that, you're ticking all the boxes in this kind of scenario, which is what we want, right? You are moving to a more optimized version, you're modernizing. You could downsize, you could right size your instance and use less capacity and don't overspend. You could use Graviton, which would also be, I think it's like 10% or 12% cheaper because it's a more performant instance. And you could have a commitment on top of it to save even more money. So those 4 things together are like the optimal way to optimize. So everybody who's watching, go to, not now, obviously you're still watching us, don't leave. But once we finish today's episode, go to your Cost Explorer or go to your car and start looking to see if you have any ElastiCache and ask those questions like, can I move to Valkey? Can I downsize? Can I move to Graviton? And then can I buy a commitment and start to work out if you can optimize? Because that is a whole bundle of savings that can really optimize your workload, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think you put it really well, Steph. I think that's what our approach is as well. Like, identify the opportunity, upgrade first to Valkey, and then you can right size your instances, do some monitoring, and then right size, and then purchase a commitment on top of it. So you get like a layered benefit on cost.
Yeah, definitely. And we've had some comments in the chat about feedback for the service. What I would say, if you'd like me to raise a product feature request for you, please email costoptimization@amazon.com and let me know the feedback, and I will happily advocate for you as a customer to kind of share that feedback back. Brilliant. Anything else we want to touch on the query side?
No, I think I did cover it. If there's any questions, I can definitely take those up.
Brilliant. And also just a reminder, we have put this in the Code Query library, so you can go and check this out today. Code Query library, again, shout out. one of the OG creators. I'm just so proud of how far it's grown. But go in there. We're moving everything. There's a lot of CURT 2.0 queries, so make sure you're trying to move to that. And there's so many ones. And if you have any suggestions, then please let us know. Okie dokie. On to our last section, which is moving to Valkey itself. But let's get back to it in hand. So on to our last section, which is all about the actual migration. So some people are asking, like, what does it look like? How do we do it? Damon, do you want to set the scene for this quick demo?
Sure. And what happens basically is you can either use the CLI or the console to do an upgrade from one engine to another. So basically what we're going to show is how easy it is. It's almost like 2 button clicks possibly to do this, and it requires no downtime. Your application will continue to operate.
On ElastiCache, you basically have the Redis OSS caches. You can just go to any of the cache that you have, and there are 2 options here. So to make it easier for you, we have added a button here just saying upgrade to Valkey, or you could also go to modify and then change the engineer to Valkey. So those are the 2 options where you can go and upgrade to Valkey from the console. Don't need to change any other settings. Just go ahead and preview changes and modify, and then it will start modifying your clusters. Damon, do you want to speak about what's going on in the backend while this is happening?
Sure. What happens is it's pretty interesting. It's part of the managed service, right, of something that AWS provides, which is we handle all that kind of stuff from the control plane and also from the decade or more how long we've been running the service. So we gracefully add nodes to the cluster based on Valkey. We replicate the data from the other nodes that are running Redis OSS. And once those nodes are in sync, then we do a graceful failover, and the client automatically understands where that is. And so it will redirect itself to that. And we do that continuously. And so since this is a NoSQL kind of approach, we have shards, which means we have lots of different basically kind of containers or different slots of data. And so what happens is we don't operate on more than one shard or more than one node on a shard at a time. So what that means is we're not going to replace your only node in a shard when this happens. And if you have, let's say, you have a primary and a replica, we're not going to replace that primary until that replica has been upgraded and we gracefully fail over. So we do a lot of this spinning up systems, installing the appropriate software. We replicate, ensure it's all working properly. We take the old nodes out of the cluster topology. We do all that for you.
Yeah, and one thing to note, like while this is happening, your existing cluster, it's still intact. You can still reference that. All the shards are available while the modification is happening on the backend.
Yeah, we had a question which is zero downtime, hopefully. So is there any downtime?
Exactly, zero downtime. Drop-in replacement, zero downtime, no interruption to your application.
There's also a question which is upgrade with zero downtime. Does Red Application Driver also work for Valkey?
Yes, exactly. Since it is a drop-in replacement and it is using the Redis protocol, it's completely compatible. So if you're using, whether it's the Redis client in Java or whether it's the .NET Stack Exchange or something, automatically works. No changes necessary. The IP addresses don't change. The configuration endpoint doesn't change. You don't need to restart your application or anything.
Brilliant. Okay. Anything else to show on this page?
No, I think we. Yeah.
How long does it take to do?
It takes a few minutes. I think it takes around like 15-20 minutes, if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
It could take longer depending on how much data you have. Really, that's what it kind of comes down to. There's a certain minimum amount because there's just the infrastructure that we have to deploy and do. And then on top of that, there's the replication of the data. So if you have terabytes of data, it's going to take quite a bit longer than if you have, a few gigabytes of data.
Another question. Is there any reason why someone wouldn't move to Valkey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I off the top of my head, I can't think of one. I think if people are using, I guess if they're running open source and they just, have a risk, they're risk averse, like we just don't, that's understandable. But again, since this is completely compatible, there's no downside. I'll put it this way. There's no downside to doing it. But, some companies and some customers are very conservative. They want to go through a complete test cycle of everything, and I totally get that, and that makes a lot of sense. I would recommend any customer do that, but there's no reason not to.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued, like, what's the caveat? Because there is, I think, and often that is the risk, right? People are worried about, I'm making a change, and that's something that scares a lot of users. But in reality, if it's going to optimize and it's also going to be the same performant, if not better, then take that opportunity and use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last thing. I'm sorry. And I want to say that all of our future innovations are going into Valkey, not into.
Oh, okay.
So it makes a lot of sense in my head anyway to move forward with that innovation.
Brilliant. So like for us, it's Care 2.0, where all future innovations will go into that. And so we're not, at the moment, we're not getting rid of that.
Right. Yeah. Redis is still going to be around as well for ElastiCache. So.
Yeah. And so there's like a fair, it's good to focus on the new rather than the old. I think is a good reason. Okay, last little bits of questions. We're going to have Richard's summary very shortly. I wanted to know, is there any good kind of customer stories or anecdotes, don't have to say the names of customers, but things that you've seen recently that people have really kind of dove into this, or any processes, like how people rolled that out? I think that's always really interesting, because one thing before, actually, in that, how are people doing it with terms of their deployments in infrastructure as code? Are you seeing them, if I did it in infrastructure as code, it would change immediately, I'm assuming. But is there any kind of maintenance window with ElastiCache? I know there's no downtime, but sometimes people like to have a kind of maintenance window. Like, what's the best advice for doing that kind of a change?
Sure. It doesn't automatically upgrade you, during the maintenance window, like Rogbed showed. You don't do it, apply immediately, or, if you want to wait, it'll do it during the maintenance window. However, there's no reason not to do it at any point, but we would certainly say run it at a time where it's not really busy. That's just because it seems like a best practice, right? If you have a normal maintenance window, do it during that time. That would be great. But again, it's so efficient and so smooth in terms of transition. So long as you're not trying to do it at your peak time and your nodes are at 100%. We always like to say that if you're going to scale out or scale up, do it before you need to. So if you're at 80%, 90%, you should have already scaled, because, the scaling mechanism itself takes a little bit of overhead to perform anyway. Yeah. So that puts you at a kind of a strange situation where you're kind of probably can get you a little nervous. But yeah, it's, when you actually upgrade, it's online. You can do it during the maintenance window or not.
Brilliant. Yeah. Good to have that kind of awareness, I always think. Because when we talk about moving to Graviton for RDS, we see customers who would just be like, oh, I have maintenance window enabled. It will do a change in there. And they deploy it through infrastructure as code. It overwrites it. So I'm always just reminding people, like, sometimes you might want to do like a bit of a drift and then catch it up with infrastructure as code. But yeah, it seems like in this that there's nothing to it. Another question quickly, which is, does Redis modules work also with Valkey? I'm assuming yes.
If you're running open source Valkey, there are also Valkey modules, which are very similar. Since we don't own Valkey, it's part of the Linux Foundation. We don't actually control that. We have never supported using Redis modules in ElastiCache, even if it was the Redis OSS engine. However, the functionality that some of the modules provide are built into ElastiCache, like the JSON aspect of it, JSON queries and such. So we do build a lot of the features that are part of the modules into the services themselves. And if you have specific requests, again, like Steph said, we can submit PFRs, but I would encourage you to go look at the ElastiCache documentation page and see all the different functionality and how that maps. It's pretty easy.
Right. And we also had this comment from ZB_ski, whoever you are, you've been very great today. So don't play with fire. That's the best time. Keep you on your toes.
Yeah. I don't often, what's the most interesting man in the world? It's like, I don't often do something, but I always do it in production, Yeah,
that's so funny. It was like the other day I started making changes to something at 5 p.m. on a Friday. And I was like, I was like, said it out loud to myself, like, why? You know the rules. It's just like, it's no different than doing it any other time, but it is, because if you do it wrong, you've screwed yourself on the weekend. So just be more careful with that kind of a thing. Brilliant. All right, let's bring on our secret Richard summary. So as a reminder, Richard sits in, he's in the chat, he's helping out, and he's also listening and creating a funny summary of the episode. No, he is not AI. One of the things as well, that's not AI. It'll be a sad day if I replace Richard with AI. And he writes a funny summary of the episode. You can skip all the way to the end of an episode that we have on this show to see what it covers in that kind of detail anytime, so you can kind of get a summary of what we talked about. So this one is cash in on savings. So I'm sure he's not the first one, but he is the one who's done it on this. It's like a dad joke. I keep doing dad jokes at the moment. It's terrible, so I'm loving it. If you can query it, you can cache it. Yes, that is the phrase. I love that. Easily identify opportunities using that query library. Migrate to Valkey, right size, commit to an RA. Richard, where's Gravaton? We missed Gravaton. I'm joking. But yeah, always do that. These things. Thank you so much. Even saying agentic Richard coming soon. Brilliant. Okay, we've got a last 2 minutes. Anything else you guys want to cover before we finish up?
Yeah, the infrastructure as code definitely works. We even work with Terraform to address a couple things. So whether it's CloudFormation and Terraform, yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Rugby, any kind of last anecdotes or notes you've got from customers that you want to finish off with?
Yeah, I think auto manufacturing has been very focused on cost cutting these days, right? So with this opportunity, this is getting really good attention, good traction within the auto manufacturing customers. So I think you should also take a look at what opportunities there are within your environment. I think it's a good way to save some cost while getting additional performance as well.
Brilliant. Okay, that has been it. Thank you so much for joining us back in this season. Next week, we're going to be doing a 2-parter. We're going to be doing a bit more of a vibe coding session. This whole season, we are going to be doing a little bit more hands-on keyboards, going into technical talks. Like today, we've been a little bit more technical into this than normal. So the whole season, kind of expect that from us. We've got, I think, 4 coding episodes definitely planned. We're going to be doing how you automatically email out reports from Athena. So tune in next time. And don't forget, stick around to hop over to LinkedIn to go and check out the live stream that we have going on over there for the rest of the day. That is it. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you all next time. Bye.